appellate writers, brief writers, researchers, a team of legal experts who work direct legal representation for free for Muslims anywhere in the U.S. if you have an issue in immigration, civil or criminal at the federal level that is a civil rights, civil liberty, or constitutional issue. So that's who we are, that's what we do. Charlie's going to come up here as soon as they find him and give the presentation. I have something I want to hand out. There's no fundraising tonight, and there's no fundraising attached to it. The Muslim Legal Fund is going to open 60 chapters this year in the U.S. Chapters. We've had one for 18 years. In 1 year, we're going to open 60. 60 chapters of volunteers who help us in all the major cities across the U.S. We want people in every masjid to be our representative. We want to call them our advocates for justice. Here's a brochure about our volunteer program that you can go online and pick out. There's about 13 positions that you can volunteer for us in this community. And we would like all of you that want to help or serve or be part of the Muslim Legal Fund, take one of these brochures and sign up as a volunteer to the position that fits you best. I apologize for, one, I'm losing my voice, and second, something happened to my eye at Juma today, and I'm not sure what's going on, but I hope it's not contagious, so don't shake my hand or don't hug me today, because I'm not sure what's going on with my eye. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles. Please welcome the director of our law center, Charles Swift.
Before I start, let me put in a thing on volunteers. One of the things that we need help with, and it probably is on there, is translators. We can do 3 languages right now at the center. Arabic, besides English. Arabic, Urdu, and French. We've got speakers in those parts, and we've used all those. But when it gets beyond that, not so good. And we want to use the community's money as smart as possible, and I hate to hire people when there's someone in the community who can do a terrific job and would be willing to do so. So if you have language skills in other languages that are in Islamic countries, please let us know. We might not have anything now, but odds on we will. Odds on we will. I've been asked to speak today on the program, et cetera, and this is sort of a look up into the future, and I'm going to talk to you about some trends that we're seeing and open it up for you for questions. So I'm trying to guess what questions you have and on the brochure, et cetera. We said Muslim ban 3.0, or I'll talk about where the Muslim ban is now. This is one of our most constant questions. And denaturalization issues that seem to be now arising. I think we were saved in part, the laws turned more favorable recently with the recent Supreme Court decision. And then, you know, what I see in the future here in the next 6 months or so, based on trends we're starting to see. And then I'll throw it open for questions. First, I'm just going to, how many people know about the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America? How many of you know? Oh my gosh, we've only got about 4 of you, 5, 6, 7. Do you mind if I take a moment and explain what we are? Okay. The Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America is a national, is a boutique national security firm. What do I mean by that? Boutique means we're small but specialized, and that we have particular area expertise. What is national security about? Well, national security is when they use the word terrorist. We don't represent terrorists. We have hundreds of cases. The government uses it in almost every case. I have yet to represent a terrorist. Primarily, the biggest problem since 9/11 for every Muslim in America is guilt by association. Whether that's the current president associating Islam with everything bad, Islamophobia, or the FBI associating somebody you once ran into or a political view or something with the potential to do violence. Those associations are ludicrous, yet they are the basis of government policy. And we're working every way we can to fight that. So to fight guilt by association, we find that it exists in 3 different areas, and these are where our concentration is, and then we have a 4th department to talk about why it's so important right now. The first department is, the biggest cases are guilt by association, are the most prominent are criminal cases. They're the ones who grab the headlines. We had the largest headline grabbing case in America last year. How many of you all remember the Orlando nightclub shooting? You know, that was that moment when I saw the television and I made this prayer. I'm a Catholic, but I pray too, and we pray to the same God. And I know that. We're all people of the book. And every time the news comes on and there's a shooting, here's how the prayer goes. Please, God, may as many survive, and may you give wisdom or comfort to the families of those who have been injured or killed. That's my first prayer. Here's my second prayer. Please, God, do not let a Muslim be involved. Is that not your second prayer? Okay, sometimes my prayers are answered. More often than not, my prayers are often answered, but sometimes they're not, and they weren't in Orlando. And we represented North Solomon, which was classic guilt by association. Nobody, you know, in any other case, the wife does not get charged. No one would think the wife. Las Vegas later, the girlfriend, et cetera, all that, not charged. In Orlando, because she's Muslim, she's charged. And she was interrogated like no other suspect. She was, you know, basically, you know, she was a very simple, very sweet Palestinian girl, you know, who had come up through special ed, but everybody said this about her: she was the best mother they'd ever seen. And they said, you know, she was best with children that they'd ever seen. And they put her in a room and for 15 hours worked on her mind until she agreed to things that had never happened. We proved that in a court of law in Orlando, Florida. Some things that helped the whole world. That helped the Muslim community dramatically. Because you might notice around last March, there was no talk about how Muslims are bad. Biggest shooting in America at the time on the trial, and it disappeared.
Yeah. Okay, 2 seconds. This case was Omar killed 48 people, died in the process, and the first time in U.S. history the government decided to prosecute his wife for his crime. So they could establish guilt by association, collective punishment, and all of that. And so we defended the wife.
Yes. We didn't defend Omar. No, Omar was dead, and we would have never defended Omar. Part is, I think I put clear on this part on Noor. That was a huge success. We also proved that undercover informants, turned out that Omar's father was an undercover informant for the FBI. So let me get this straight. You have his father as the undercover informant who was spying on his masjid and trying to get people in his masjid to commit a crime, okay? And despite that, his son commits the worst mass shooting in American history at that time. He got topped. How safe is that undercover informant program making us? Really hard question. They tried to hide that whole part on it. It came out during the trial. So there were some significant impacts on that. We also work beyond that on the terrorist watch list and terrorist watch listing, no-fly list, et cetera, on that. And that's been a huge part of our practice, the civil practice. It's a huge, you know, I don't need a show of hands, but I know by looking around here, at least 15 of you get 4 S's on your boarding pass every time you get on a plane. And you get to have that wonderful go through every inspection in the world while they hold up the line, and isn't that fun, right? You don't have to raise your hands. I'm not embarrassing anybody here, although if that's happening to you, we'd like to hear from you in the process of what we could do. We also are challenging all of the regulations with it. There's been a lot of litigation from 2001 to present on these lists. Our approach, and what that does is it's established some procedures. But the government in the age of Trump is not following the procedures. Everything's denied, no reasons are given, the process is non-existent. It exists on paper, but not in reality. And so what we're doing is taking individual cases around the country, the ones that we think we can push up the most, and start to point out to the court systematically that what the government says it's doing, it isn't doing. That they're not providing due process, and to define what due process is in these cases. We've had some success on that. We expect to have significantly more success. The government sometimes takes away our best cases by giving the people what they want, but that's okay. One of these times they won't, but in the meantime, I'm happy to get every brother and sister off the no-fly list. We've had significant success there. Get them off Quad S lists, get them their transportation worker identity card, get them reinstated to their position, that sort of thing. And we've had significant success with that. But we do it on an individual basis. So we have that in our civil department part. In immigration, which is another form, we have the same problem. And that was where we'll come and talk about the Muslim ban, is, there appears to be two sets of immigration, well, there does not appear. There are two sets of immigration laws in this country. The written laws that apply to everyone, and the unwritten ones that apply to Muslims. Now, there's some written ones that apply, Muslim ban. But I've always said that the far greater, for Muslims who are already here, is the systematic denial of their immigration status under a program called the Controlled Application Review and Resolution Program, kind of like CRAP, and it is. And what it does is it identifies Muslims for special treatment inside it, which results in extraordinary delays in their processing, results in denial on pretextual basis. We have probably one of the two leading CARP cases in the country right now. That's in Washington, D.C. How it comes down, and we've raised a series of admin challenges to the program itself. And we're hopeful. We'll see. We've gotten farther than anyone else has on this program. We will see where we go. But we've got a good judge, and with God's help and some decent support from the community, we may be able to significantly impact this program. And, because in our view, it's a program that violates Congress's Article 2 or Article 1 powers, because Congress wrote the law on immigration. It's just the executive isn't following it. Like the executive's not following a lot right now. It's also on the part we view violates the Administrative Procedures Act. So those are a huge challenge for us right now in what we're doing. So we cover in national security. And so when the government says it's a terrorist watch list, or we're denying them because of their benefits because of security concerns, i.e. terrorism, we're the case for that. And when I say the government, what I'm not talking about is the government of Texas. I'm talking about the federal government. The FBI, point out, how many people know what the FBI's budget is? What's that? Their budget. I came from government, if you read my bio. And what I will tell you in government is never listen to what they say. Always look at how they spend their money. Because how somebody spends their money is what their real priorities are. Okay? So do we know what the FBI's budget is? Not 20 billion, that would be really high. That would build all of Trump's wall. Their budget is what Trump wants for the wall, about 5 billion, a little more, closer to 6. Well, he wants 5.7 billion. So FBI budget about the same. I have a solution. If they called me up to Congress, I could cut a lot of money from the FBI budget if they'd like to build a wall, not that I'm for walls, but I can help them find the money. Because you know where they spend half of that $5.7 billion? If you go to the FBI's website, how many people have ever been to the FBI's website? Probably not, right? You don't want to know. The first thing you'd find out is what they say their mission is. They are a domestic security agency devoted to counterterrorism. And here you thought that they were busting guys on Wall Street or investigating Trump. No, they're domestic. The only reason they're interested is it involves the Russians. Not so much terrorism. But, they're an intelligence agency. And they spend about $3 billion a year on each one of you. Tracking, watching, gathering intelligence. That's not, it's a lot of their practices, in my view, are unconstitutional. They're also a waste of money. Because my experience with the Muslim community is I'm talking to the most law-abiding people in the country. That, a religious Muslim is more likely to be law-abiding than anyone I've met. That's not to say every religious Muslim is perfect. Gosh knows all Catholics are not perfect, including some priests. And, I pray every night for the priesthood and for the restoration of faith to our religion. But I don't say that Catholicism is evil because of a few men. And I don't think you do either. Nevertheless, and I gave you this quote on the part on it is, this was from a former director of the FBI. You know what he said? When, after actual terrorist attacks started occurring? Well, it's not looking for a needle in a haystack. It's looking for a needle in a stack of needles. I want you to think about that for a moment. Looking for a needle in a stack of needles. How does the FBI see everyone in this room? As a needle. Everyone's a threat. We're devoted to protecting on that guilt by association, whether it's guilt by Islam, guilt by parts. That's what we do. So what are we seeing in the recent trends? One of our advantages is, in this part, Cadell likes to use the canary in the coal mine, the center in the part, and I agree with him, in the battle of civil liberties, Muslims are the canary in the coal mine. And by the way, this has always been, the government's policies aren't new. And we could say this is evil, this is natural for the government. If we go back in time, all Japanese were needles. Even though they were some of the most valiant fighters for the United States on the battlefields of Europe, no one fought harder than Japanese Americans. No one. More medals of honor, more battles won, more combat days than any unit in the in U.S. history. Before them, German Americans. Before them, Chinese Americans. Before them, Irish Americans. Before them, Catholics. Before them, almost every different group that we come onto, except for the first group to get here, which ironically was fleeing. Why did the Pilgrims come to the United States? Anybody taken their citizenship test recently? What's that? Religious freedom, right? To escape religious persecution. What I've learned about Islam over the period of time, that a lot of Muslims have come to the United States to escape religious persecution and to practice Islam as they see fit. It's one of the great advantages. The First Amendment of the Constitution says, does everybody know what do you think when you think of the First Amendment? What's that? Freedom of the press? Freedom of speech? Is that the first thing in the, do you know what it says? It begins this way. Congress shall make no law establishing religion or preventing the free exercise thereof. It's called the Establishment and Free Exercise Clauses. That's what our founding fathers were most concerned about, because they had been religiously oppressed. It's what makes this country great is the lack of the lack that we don't have a state religion. So that, I can be here as a Catholic and you can be here as a Muslim. And neither of us, both groups that have been historically discriminated against, aren't discriminated against. Okay? So, to me, there's a fundamental basis on this, and the government is attacking that basis in what they do, and so we built this up. There are a lot of organizations that fight for you all, but what we do is fight in the cases where no one else can. Now, that's the part is, why is a white Catholic guy talking to y'all? Right? Well, in this battle, we have to be formulated in a way to make a fight in a courtroom in Orlando or New York or California or St. Louis on the terms that the fight's going to be made, and to win these fights. Khalil, when he brought me in, was there, you know, somewhat like a football coach. He said, I really don't care how you do it, just win. You know, please win. Winning would be good. And we've tried to build ourselves in a way to win. And so we do unique cases. We do the different cases, and we've set up funding and set up a way to do it in a way that protects the community, because I like to say to every community leader, I am here to represent you, but I don't want to. Because if I'm representing you, it's not good for the community, because they've already been destroyed. So we have a preventive law program I'm going to talk about a little. But what do I see coming? So in these national security parts. Well, we're national. We're this boutique law firm, but we do things around the country. Hey, you're fortunate, it's easy. You can drive over and stop by our office if there's any question, but what do we do around the country? You know, we do the same thing everywhere. And because of Dallas's wonderful location for airports and incredibly cheap airfares, and the fact that real estate's pretty cheap here, and the cost of living is, we can do it cheaper than having offices in New York, LA, Detroit, and that sort of thing. It's easier to be centrally located. But here's the things we're seeing. Since the Muslim ban, the government is basically denying every request for applications for waivers. Under the Muslim ban, there's a waiver provision. The government is getting far more, for the longest time the government left off in these delays in immigration program. They just did nothing. Now they're aggressively starting to deny them again, which puts people into jeopardy of deportation. It was sort of like, we won't give you the benefits, but we won't deport you for 8 years under Obama. That was the 8 years of Obama. Deportation efforts are now stepping their way up. The government has been actively hiring and recruiting lawyers to engage in denaturalization. I think they were set back significantly last summer by a decision by the United States Supreme Court that made it much more difficult to do that. But you know, we are now involved in denaturalization cases, and we expect that to increase. It's certainly next on Jason Miller's list, because he went out and hired 30 attorneys, although we have no budget to do that. Then the other area that we're seeing is one of the things that was changed under Obama was the attack on the charities ended. There was a lot of bad things that, you know, everything else continued. The immigration problems from Bush to Obama really didn't change, and anyone in this room will tell you. But anyhow, what we are seeing is now the FBI now investigating charities. We know that. I'm not going to tell you which ones. I keep my clients confidential, but we know that because we're helping them with the subpoenas. We're helping them with the investigations. This is a huge part of what we do on the part, is both help charities get ready for masjids. In other words, take a look if anything's wrong on the part, and two, look at, assist when there's an investigation. And we've been very successful in getting them to close those investigations. But that is a growing trend. They're particularly now looking back at the conflict in Syria and trying to see, okay, did this charity do anything that we can charge? Much like they shut down all the charities on the part. So there is a renewed interest in charities that has not been there for a while. And we're starting to see the subpoenas and working with these clients. The difference is, 15 years ago, they didn't know who to hire. At least we're here to help on the process, and I think we're going to have some success on that. The greatest success we have, and one of the greatest differences, and the reason I want to talk and educate everyone on what's coming up and where the government is going, is the difference when MLFA case funded 15 years ago. When you get an indictment or they take the action, it's sort of like being told you have stage 4 cancer. It's not impossible to save you. It can be done. but it's really, really hard. I do, you know, part of the thing is, one of the things the center allows us to do that was never there before is if you think something might be wrong, you think there's interest, you're concerned, you're suddenly treated differently during travel parts. The best part is not to say to myself, hey, I know I'm innocent, okay? I know I didn't do anything wrong. This is sort of like, I've got this ache in my back and this hurts and all that sort of stuff, but I know I'm healthy, right? I know I'm healthy. You know, and I'm a guy, I'm macho, et cetera, but my wife makes me go to the doctor because, you know, there might be something wrong. We have the ability to be preventive, and that's where Sherry Crittenden comes in, with her ability to come in and look at nonprofit organizations. And where coming to me, if, hey, the FBI's called, and this is a summation on a very long talk on the part when the FBI calls you, and it's called What Would Bill Do? Something I always want to leave people with is, what would Bill do? And Bill in this is Bill Gates, and he's down at the Gates Foundation. I use this because it's charities, religious, etc. Knock, knock, knock at the Gates Foundation. Hi, we're the FBI, and we want to speak with Bill Gates. Now, who wants to volunteer what happens next? First question, will Bill speak to the FBI that day? No. What's that? He's going to say, talk to my lawyer, right? And if he does speak to the FBI, the question will be, not will he have a lawyer, right? He'll have a lawyer. The question is, how many? Probably you'll have 3 or 4 former United States attorneys representing him in that room, right? Why is that? Because Bill has unlimited money. And too often in the Muslim community, you don't know who to hire and you're concerned about money. That's why we're pro bono and why we want to be able to deliver the same quality service that you have. We do it around the country. Don't be embarrassed. Understand they say, you know, and the part is, if I just talk to them, they won't suspect me. Really? Why would you believe that? What have they done in the last 15 years that would convince you of that? If I'm honest and open with them, they'll know I'm a good guy or a good bad person. My part to you is, hey, you know, if you're a terrorist, we're not going to be able to help you. But if you're like every other Muslim we've helped and you're not, I think we will. And in the process in this, call us. It's where we do our best work. So with that, on the part on what's happening on the Muslim ban, and you know, the biggest part on that is waivers, and we could talk to you. If anyone wants counseling on how to fill out a waiver form or part for a family member, please contact us. I've got to say, it's not been going well. But we need to build up the cases. We won't win this overnight. Like all the decisions afterwards in the part, we have to build up a set of it. But giving up is not the way. Khalil has told me about what the Prophet, I believe, I'm going to summarize, you can correct me please, but you know, the first thing is to change something if you can. If you can't change it, you know, do everything you can to change it, and if you can't, hate it until you can.
With your hand, speak against it.
Yeah, speak against it or hate it. In Catholicism, we have St. Francis of Assisi. You know, the courage to change the things we can, the serenity to accept the things we cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Prophet and St. Francis were pretty close together. With that, because Khalil's stepping up to me saying, hey.
I want to make a statement and turn over to Q&A.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is I was going to turn to Q&A.
So I'm going to summarize that what he is, and he's speaking on a lot of issues, but the idea is you have to know this is a law firm that specializes in national security issues that affect the Muslim community. And it doesn't mean you have a national security issue, it's the U.S. policy in national security affecting you. So we've learned that there's 8 different agencies in the U.S. that report to a terror watch list. Okay, so any of those agencies, you put anybody on it. It takes articulable suspicion That,
Oh, God.
Meaning, your name, your ethnicity, the country of origin is enough to get you on the list. You don't have to do anything. So if you're on the list, the government says, don't worry about it. Go on with your life. This is how we function. So it's legal for them to do that. But the minute you notice that you might be on a list, because every time you fly, you're randomly selected, or...
There is no such thing as random selection.
or... Bismillah. Or you get told you can't fly, or your bank calls you and says, come get your money, you're my best customer, we don't want to do business with you anymore, or you get the 8-hour interrogation in your border crossing instead of normal, then something you've tasted makes you feel like you're different. Well, at that point, you have the right, as a U.S. citizen or a resident of the United States, to have a process to get through that so it doesn't keep happening. You have to have a way to say, hey, look, if there is an issue, let's fix it, or let's get through it. But if you don't address it, it'll continue to happen. So we are encouraging you to let us know if you think you have some issue anywhere in your life of where it might be affecting you, so that we can help you address it and move through it so that it no longer can happen. So we're doing that in immigration, we're doing it in civil, we're doing it in criminal. And when he talked about the Nur Salman case, we were talking about Omar. Not one person in here would ever defend what Omar did. In fact, we would condemn him. But the United States government, out of 184 times they've accused somebody of terrorism, which Omar is what they called his act, they have convicted 184 people. They hadn't lost. But they decided to go one step further and prosecute his wife. And when that happened, they were trying to expand the way they prosecute. So when Charlie and Linda, the other lawyer in our office who defended her, got a not guilty verdict, that's the first time the government ever lost a case. And they proved...
They tied sometimes.
And they proved the government withheld evidence that proved she was innocent and prosecuted her anyway. So in that trial, the judge came to the lawyers and said, listen, what I've seen you do in this court was so impressive. Your law center here in Dallas should apply to be federal public defender resource for these national security cases all over the country. In other words, you have so much expertise in one center, more than any other law firm in America on our issues. And so these are the things that we do. This is why we do it, and we'll turn it over to you now for Q&A.
Yes, please, on the part is, now that you know what I might be able to answer it on, so if you ask me a question about divorce, I'm going to be really bad. If you ask me a question about mortgage lending or my contract or the business, probably not. We specialize, but on anything in my issues, please, yes.
You were saying something since last March, Muslim shooting stop happening, something like that.
Pardon? Since last March?
Yeah, you were saying something that you didn't finish it up.
Oh, well, in March was the Salman decision, et cetera. What I'm saying is that in the last year or so, really since January, I'm sorry, is that these were trends we were seeing. Khalil always accuses me of talking way too fast. That there are trends across the board where we're seeing the government now starting to come back and look at nonprofits. That since the Supreme Court's decision last year in the Muslim ban, we've seen where no one gets a waiver. The court relied on the idea that it was a waiver. There just are no waivers. We've seen significant increase in deportation type cases. And they have instituted this task force. They haven't brought any cases that we've seen yet, but to try and denaturalize people.
How many of you know somebody who applied for citizenship or whatever, and it is taking longer than it should? All right, so the government has a process that should take, a couple of months to get through the process. But
Not anymore.
yeah, your application, let's say this is a stack of applications. Here's what's happening. Okay, approved or denied, approved or denied, approved or denied. Set it over here. Approved or denied, approved or denied. The process. This over here, this is the ignore file. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to approve it, I'm not going to deny it. And it just sits there, come back. And it goes on 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Nothing ever happens until you see the government. So this is all
Yeah, I'm hopeful to. Yep. Okay, in the process in there, yes. What's your question? Pardon? Yes. Here's the part, only on the no-fly list. Yeah, he's supposed to. But he's got to do a lot of things right. In other words, the first set of notices, he has to file a trip complaint for being forced not to fly. Then they'll send him a letter that says, yes, you're officially on the no-fly list. If you'd like more information, send another letter. Then the person sends another letter, if they know how to do it, citing the right authority, and they say, oh, you're on the no-fly list because you're a threat to national security. If you want to know more information, please send another letter. And, this is the way we go through the process and the hearing and the part, and then they go, okay, well, you haven't explained to us why you're not a threat to national security to our satisfaction, even though we haven't told you why, and you're going to have to stay on that. Sorry. It's sort of like in an endless voicemail. We have multiple cases in this. When we get involved, the first part is we know how to navigate through it. Yeah, part of the thing. We know how to navigate through the no-fly list because we've been doing it for 3 years. I have to say, I thought it was a pretty good letter. The no-fly list is complicated. So we've learned the process in it, and we've been fighting it out on the part with the government. We've had, just when we get ready to sue them, to date, they've taken every one of our clients off the no-fly list. In other words, we spend about 4 or 5 months fighting with them, sending them letters back and forth, and when we get to the point that they'd have to tell our client why they're on the no-fly list, really, under the law, or we get to sue them because they say, there's no issue, they're not on the no-fly list. That's been happening over the next 3. But the good news is, sooner or later, they're not going to take somebody off. And sooner or later, and we'll get to sue them because they behaved the same way the whole way, and we look for that case on the part on it. And number 2 is, in the meantime, we're getting a lot of people off the no-fly list. And the whole process is designed to wear you down. That's what it's sort of like if you want to make a sexual harassment claim against Congress. Congress had to set up a process, but they didn't want to have it happen to them, and they get to pass laws, so they basically made it impossible. You have to fill out this, do that, ask this person, etc. And if you don't have a lawyer, you're not going to make it through. That's the process. So my answer to you on the part is, if somebody doesn't let you on an airplane, call us. If you know somebody who hasn't been let on an airplane, call us. Okay? And we know how to make the process work. We've spent 3 years, and this was what makes us unique around the country. Khalil gave me the simple mandate to create the law firm. He had been hiring law firms around the country. To create the law firm he wanted to hire all the time. Yeah.
We would just tell the community that we can be a vehicle to create a legal fund to help anybody. So what would happen is, if somebody had an imam, a leader, activist, organizer, anywhere in the country, and they said, hey, we feel like they're being dealt with unfairly by the legal system, then we could go there. If we agreed, we could open a legal fund, then tell the community, donate to us, we're tax exempt, zakat eligible, and we will go find the best lawyer in the country for that issue. We'll pay the lawyer, we'll pay the experts, and we'll just tell the community, this is the case, these are the people, this is the issue, if you want to help, donate. So we did case funding all over the U.S., and every time we went to go find the best lawyer for that case, anywhere in the country. So as we're looking for the best lawyer, we hired great lawyers all the time, but sometimes they weren't good in our cases. They had great resumes, they were horrible for our issues. Other great lawyers were very good on our issues. So we saw the difference in court. by experience. And after 14 years of just case funding, we said, listen, let's take that knowledge. Let's go pick the lawyers we like the most, hire them full-time on a salary, create a nonprofit law firm, and let them work together as a team for free for the Muslims. So that's what we created.
Yeah. So what I'm saying on the part is, if you've got somebody, the government is supposed to give you a letter. When they created the regulations, they made it, well, you had to ask for the letter even though they denied you onto the flight in the process in this. I don't think that actually complies with what the court ruled in a couple of cases, but we haven't gotten the case far enough up. But if you're denied, call us. If you have somebody overseas and you have a friend or family member who says, I can't get on the plane, I'm a U.S. citizen and they won't let me on the plane. They've sent me down to the embassy. Don't go to the embassy, call us. We can fix it without talking to the embassy. And remember, the embassy just views this as an opportunity to interrogate you. They won't tell you why. They'll say, this is literally, we've had people go in for the interview. Tell us everything bad you did so we can understand, because we don't know why you're on the list. But obviously you've done something bad. Please tell us about it. Guy says, I don't know about it. He says, well, come on, you got to know bad people. Well, in other words, the entire part is, you prove to me you're innocent. And they're not going to let you on, they have no power to let you on the list, off the list. They have no power whatsoever. Anyhow, next question. Oh, you've got to have questions. Yes. You looked like you had a question.
How safe it is how safe it is for getting a global entry and nexus passes?
Oh, it's a great idea. If they deny it to you, I won't be able to fix it. But here's the beautiful part on it necessarily. I've actually found that guys who are having problems, or in the past, the global entry does an actual investigation and it can clear you out. Particularly if, and this is one of the problems. You all have Arabic names, largely speaking. Arabic is in the Arabic script. And it does not translate exactly to English, right? And there are a lot of very, very similar names. An awful lot of people. I believe I have one guy who's been denied his citizenship and a mom. I'm absolutely convinced of this. We're taking this to court, but I think when we ultimately get there, they'll say, oops, I think they've had a mistaken identity on this guy for 15 years, and they won't fix the list. The government, in a famous case that existed, started right when MLFA started, I think they helped it out a little at the beginning, out in Oregon, finally paid the attorneys $5 million because they put some woman on the list incorrectly. And they knew it. They knew it in the first week. They wouldn't admit the mistake. The government doesn't like to, the government does not like to enter into the idea that there might be a mistake or they might have made a mistake in something. One of my jobs is to convince them that they have in a way that they keep face. I do an awful lot of that. I'll do my best work behind closed doors. Next question. Yes. 2 questions. His hand was up first, but I'll come back to you.
Thanks, sir. If we go to the CIA or FBI website to know some more information,
yes,
do you think they're going to prey on us?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. If you'd like me to print them out, the CIA really doesn't have a website. The CIA is the government agency that will not be named. Largely speaking, for Muslims in America, God, I wish the CIA actually was in charge of it. But something called the Hyde Act prevents them from doing that. The CIA got in a lot of trouble in the 70s for its activities in the United States, so they're forbidden from doing domestic work. So they're very involved overseas, and they tend to know things a lot better than the FBI. The FBI, in my view, has a lot less expertise. The CIA has a lot greater expertise. The CIA would clear 99% of the people because they actually know what terrorists look like. The FBI needs to find terrorists to keep their money.
So on the other hand, answer to my question.
The question you ask is, if I go to the website, I don't know the answer.
Because you have asked a question to us.
Yeah, have you ever been to their website? And I ask it rhetorically in some sense.
Quote unquote, we are kind of a little bit afraid to go because they're going to get the bookings and everything.
Yes.
They can cut down back that who is the real guy looking.
Well, in the part on that, when you go to a website, all they get is a hit from the address on the part. They don't get a whole lot of information on it unless you leave the information intentionally. The ability on the web, when I just visit a website, the server will record the IP. I know all of this from Solomon. The server will record the IP address of the computer that came in or mobile part that came in. They'll see that somebody came in and looked at their website, but it's going to be very, very hard for them to trace who it is unless they already were looking at that person. Yeah. My encouragement is if you want to know more about the FBI, stop by. We're happy to tell you. I go to the website all the time, but yours.
Mass media is making us like satans. And mass media is making us like devils, Satans.
Okay. We're going to have the Charlie 101 on mass media. Okay? What's news? What is news? Well, if you're reputable, you try and be truthful. But what's the most important thing you do?
No, not yet.
If you're a newspaper or a television show? Anybody? You get people to read you or watch you. It's a business, and they're in the business of selling stories. And this tells you, sadly, something about the American character. I don't look at the media, the mainstream mass media, as evil. They just tell simple stories. Now, in the process, that's why winning cases like Solomon are so important, because if you go to the New York Times stories after that, Muslims aren't devils during that period of time. It's extraordinarily important to get the story right, and nothing hurts you like a court decision. Nothing in the part, especially in the mainstream narrative. The biggest thing I throw on the part is what I've been asked by community leaders, what do? I say, tell your story. The next thing I learned about journalists in the entire period of time is journalists are lazy or overworked, either way you want to look at it. You know, think about it. You have to write a column or you have to write something every week. You got to come up with an idea. If you don't produce a product, you don't eat. So they got to write a story. One of the biggest things that I say to Muslims is, where journalists are concerned, after vetting them, that is, knowing who they're from, what the application of their policy is, invite them down to see you all. Get them to know you. The next thing is, Muslims are so modest. You don't brag, okay? Other part is to improve the story. One of the things I know is, my understanding is that you guys are like now 10% of the doctors in America. You're 2% of the population and 10% of the doctors. So if we got rid of all the Muslims, I got news for some of these people. Your aunt's cancer isn't getting fixed. Seriously. You think it's expensive and you can't see a doctor now? Also, you know the doctor is most likely to be charitable? A Muslim doctor. And the number of masjids I have that have clinics and parts where doctors work, extraordinary. These are stories you all need to tell, and I talk to your leaders on how do we tell our story and tell it well. Let's get out in front of it, invite people. That's a suggestion from one. I thought, hey, look, I'm in the Catholic Church. We get, when you think Catholic, what do you think? Priests molesting boys, right? Yeah. Why do you think that? Well, because the media printed about it a lot. Catholicism's only to Islam the second largest religion in the world. Okay? Is it a problem everywhere all the time? No. Was it a big problem? Yes. And we've been tainted by it, but et cetera, but the important thing I think that we try to do and tell a story is, A, that we're addressing it, and B, all the good works we do. Because Catholicism is like Islam, and this is something I put on it, is to again and again, we share something in common besides the belief in the one God. And that is the belief in faith through work. Or faith by works. As Khalil's part of the thing is very similar again to the Catholic beliefs that pray in the Masjid. We believe in praying in the church, but prayer is never enough. Because God loves when you help somebody else just as much. And again, I understand Islamic modesty. Because you're to do it for the sake of God. Not for the sake of praise. If you're doing it for the sake of praise, is it really worthy in God's eyes? No. So your idea is never talk about it. Guys, you need to talk about it just a little. I don't think it will, because you're not doing it for praise. You're doing it for your faith, but people need to see your faith accurately. Right? That's the part, that's something that I would encourage each one of you to do on the process, or to think about it in the part. And that's, hey, look, I'm not here having an advertisement, but we're going to do something for the public. Invite somebody from the press. Invite somebody from the media to come down. Okay? Invite people into the process, because here's what I know. I know this in juries, and I know it from myself. And make non-Muslim friends. Seriously. And I love having religious discussions with Muslims, including Khalil. It deepens my faith, it helps my understanding, and I hope they understand my position. But here's the thing I know. The more Muslims I know, the more I think highly of Muslims. Everyone I get to know. And I was fortunate in my military career. I started out very early with lots of Muslims. I worked in foreign military sales for a while, and an awful lot of my clients were from Islamic states, Muslim world.
I didn't tell him that. He's a retired lieutenant.
Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of my early clients, but this is before I was a JAG. I was just an officer. And I did foreign military sales because I did the human rights part of it, interestingly enough. But anyhow, I forced all of my time in law school. The more I knew Muslims, the better I thought of them. And I know on every jury questionnaire, it's simple. When you ask somebody who's Islamic phobic, okay? And then you ask, have you ever met a Muslim? No. No. They hate what they don't know. Learn something from the gay rights movement in America. It's simple. 30 years ago, public opinion was more against gay people than it is against Muslims right now. It was a crime in Texas to engage in homosexual acts. Not a religious crime. See, I have my own beliefs from the Catholic Church as you have yours. I separate those into state crimes and religious crimes. I don't expect the state to enforce canonical law. As a believer, I am obligated to follow it. So are you. I mean, you're not obligated to follow canonical, you follow Sharia. Sharia is no more than Islamic teachings, as I understand it. An awful lot of our stuff has to do with stuff that most people don't care about. In the thing. But, in the state of Texas, now, gay people can get married. What changed? What changed, do you think? Why did that change? Did liberal people suddenly infect the United States? Was there a sudden drop down from on heaven And it's still almost like 60% positive. It is. Not necessarily that I want to do it, but don't care or don't disapprove. 60% on gay marriage. So liberals invaded the country. Explain Trump. They didn't. Here's what happened. People got to know people who were gay. Gay people came out. They started talking to people. You realized that they were their neighbor. They realized that they were a nice human being, that we could disagree on some things, but they were decent, and the real way to treat them was to treat them decently. I watched my father go from animately anti to leading the Boy Scout movement to allow gay scouts and leaders. And the reason was he got to know people. And when you know them, it's hard to hate them. So take time to introduce and get to know people is my next part on it. Last question. Oh, there's two. Maybe I'll ask two. But these are the last two.
My question is that instead of defending, Muslims one by one, for example, those who are, banned list or no-fly, whatever, can we file a class action lawsuit against the government?
For what? Yeah. Well, the attacks on the list have already been done. Here's the hard part on a class action. In attacking it it's largely classified. There's been a lot of litigation up to this point. That litigation occurred primarily between 2006 and 2011. At the end of it, up until that point, the government said, we can just put them on the list and it doesn't matter. And for the first 5 years, the courts agreed with them. There was a class action filed. They lost. They were dismissed for no standing. Then cases stayed in. They fought for a while, just in no-fly, not on the other part on it. And then after the time on it, they came to the point that they said, okay, several cases changed the rules. And the case that changed the rules the most was an individual, not a class action. The class actions hadn't worked. And now these rules are in place. Now we need to demonstrate, first and foremost, that they're not following them. Okay? So after they put the rules in place, or what the rules mean. And so what we've found is that the best way to do is challenge them individually. Others take a different approach. We think, the Law Center is somewhat a product of my theory on this. Was Brown versus Board of Education a class action to assert affirmative action in the United States? No, it was not. Who was Brown? Everybody know what Brown versus Board of Education is, for those of you who've hung out? Most famous civil rights lawsuit in America, civil rights case in America. It ended segregation based on race. Okay? It ended separate but equal, since apart. So obviously the person who brought it was a famous and very important person, right? On behalf. No, she wasn't. Brown is a 13-year-old girl. One girl. You pick the right person, you can win the whole thing. Part of it is finding the perfect facts. Part of the problem with the class action, the ACLU takes the class action route. Part of the problem is it leaves a lot of people out. And part of the problem is the government and how it's adjusted what it does is we need to show now in individual cases that they're not living up to what they promised. And you have to do that one by one. See, when the Muslim ban first comes out, you can challenge that straight up. All Muslims. It's an illegal law or state or some part on that. But now, when they're denying people The best part on a waiver is, okay, I've got to have a U.S. citizen, I've got to have these parts, and I bring the challenge that way. There's two different philosophies. In national security, I think that you have to go case by case and point out to the court. Because when the government says, Your Honor, this is necessary for national security, and if we don't do it, people will die. What do you think the judge does? Then, when you say, Your Honor, my person's been on the list because, and was denied due process, and these systematic parts on it, and they present no threat, no one would have died, and the government cannot say otherwise. What do you think the judge does? And I can change the law that way. That's my approach. It's not everybody's. That's my approach. And it's why we're based the way we're based. And we think that when there's a lot of things. The Muslim ban should be challenged the way it was challenged. It wasn't completely, they got it through 3 ideations and finally got it through. Carl might have told you or not, I did Hamdan versus Rumsfeld, bin Laden's driver. My partner in that was Neil Katyal. Neil Katyal's all over the news too. You know, these days he's figuring out ways to get rid of Trump because before he became, before he was my partner on that, Neil wrote a lot of things, so did I, and one of the things that Neil wrote was the current special counsel statute. But Neil is the guy you bring to bring the big challenge to everything. It's who Hawaii hires. I'm the guy you bring to represent one person. Together we decided to represent Salam Hamdan because we were both big and small. I picked Salam because Salam, they wouldn't back off, but Salam never hurt anybody. He was perfect. And that's the same thing we try and do here. Plus, at the same time, defending imams, et cetera, apart. Because what we found is, and part of where it became very clear to me was when I first started the center and we were trying to figure out exactly what we do, I would try and refer people to the ACLU and they would turn them down. Because they go, well, the guys aren't good for the ACLU, they get some bad facts. And I think I differ with them on that. They didn't want to do Hamdan either. So it's an approach. Last question.
Firstly, thank you so much for coming out. My question is, how does one know that they're on a list?
Okay.
I mean, random checks is one thing, but you know.
Well, let me go on the part on random checks are rarely on it. On the part in this thing, to be on a terror watch list, these can be your indicators on different levels of the list. Okay. If your boarding pass, if you travel, your boarding pass has 4 S's. And they say that's random. No, it's not. Random checks no longer exist at airports if they ever did. They were phased out in the first year. There are no random checks. So if you're, there's one thing on, hey, look, you've got the, I have TSA pre-check on the part. So I walk through, and every once in a while they say, we're going to make you go through the regular one and search you, just to make sure that people don't think in TSA pre-check they can get away with things, right? That is random. But when you get there and they run you through everything twice, no. Number 2 is when you're re-entering the United States, if when you get to the counter, they ask you to come with them, that's because they've been told. They looked at a list. Or if your plane's met and they ask you to come with them, that means you're on the list, on a list. I can figure out which one after the period of time. If we've had clients stopped by the police, it shows up on some police parts. If you're denied the ability to purchase a firearm and they won't tell you why. These are what Khalil says when the effects start coming in your life. And if you go on the part on it and you go, hey, I'm not sure whether I am, come see me. I don't want to go through with people on their personal business on it. But remember, I'm always happy to listen. I might not have time tomorrow morning because we have a disaster, et cetera, on it. But in the part, I'll find time on it at some point, we'll listen to it, or someone in the office will. This is the advantage of doing just this. We've learned a great deal. We have almost all of their documentation now through different lawsuits. We kind of understand their policies and we can figure it out. That's one advantage in just doing this, is we're slowly collecting all of the government's policy documents. We collect them during the course of lawsuits. So we know a lot more.
Thank you all for coming. I want to thank all of you for staying and listening. Charlie can be here for a few minutes. You guys want to come and talk to him? I apologize. Something happened to my eye at Juma. I don't know what, but it is killing me. So I'm going to...
You don't look good.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say thank you for being part of this. Say hi to Charlie on your way out, and thank you all for coming. Assalamu alaikum. And don't forget to volunteer for us.
Go see a doctor. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the number of the API informants?
Oh, yes. You could ask that. Oh, it's alarming and it's a waste of money. It's alarming